and it's really good for holding all the stupid things that your kids leave lying around. Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. I just got finished making 3 of these narrow end tables like the one you see behind me here. And I wanted to walk you through how I did it. Now I made them narrow because they need to fit in a narrow space next to our living room furniture. And it works out really well if you can customize something like this for yourself. Let's go ahead and get into the build. Alright, so as we start, you see me cutting some 1x12 material for the tops. Now I cut these tops at 24 inches as you're watching them there, but I ended up not using the 24 inches. I ended up going back and making them 36 inches because I didn't think they were long enough to be functional for what I was doing. I also cut some more material that I'm going to use for the legs right there that I just put down. Now I'm wiping my hands. Alright, so to use the 1x12 material, I want to cut off the factory edges because they're kind of rough and ugly. So I go ahead and trim those off on both sides. So I have to adjust my fence, trim off the other side, and then I got some good square ends. I also run these through the planer. It's not super important to do that, but it helps. Actually, I'm working on some bigger tables to match these, which is not going to be featured in this video. But in order to make the bigger tables, I just put 2 pieces together, and now I have a 24x24 inch piece basically. Now you see I got a pretty good seam down the middle, and my kind of cheat, because I don't have a joiner, is to use this system here where the blade goes up into a sacrificial fence and you pass it along that piece, and that's going to give me a jointed edge. If you do that on both of them, then you can get a pretty good seam together. I think I put a better angle here where you can actually see a little bit of material getting trimmed off and giving you a better seam on your glue up. So you can kind of see what's going on there. It's not perfect. There's definitely much better ways to do this, but this is rustic furniture, so I try not to spend too much time making everything fancy. All right, now with these 2x12 pine boards, you're gonna have some knots here and there. So I'm using some CA glue and filling up those knots. And once it's full, I go ahead and sand it down with some 120 grit sandpaper. I think the final grit I use is 220, but 120 is good to start. And now that knot is all filled up. Alright, so with the tops, once again, these are shorter than the ones I ended up with. I like to do a round over on the top side of the top. And when I do a round over, I'm really careful not to chip off the corner, so I start and I back the router up, and then I pull it the correct direction back the other way. I do have some tear out from time to time, which I gotta glue back on, so I try to be careful. It doesn't always work. Now on the bottom of these tops, I'm going to use a chamfer. So I'm switched to a chamfer bit here and just adding a chamfer profile on the bottom edge, and that gives it a good look. You got to go slower on the end grain because it's a little bit more intense for my palm router there. But ultimately on all of these tops, I use a round over on the top, chamfer on the bottom, and I've done that many times. I just like the way it looks, so I don't mix it up too much. And of course you got your sanding. Since it's already been planed, I go ahead and do a 120 grit, and then I follow it up with a 220 grit, and that gets it ready for staining. Now with this stain, I just have a water-based dark walnut stain. And I just put it on heavy, and then I wipe off the excess, and I don't think too much about it. After the stain is on there, I put 2 or 3 coats of polyurethane. Actually, at least 3 coats of polyurethane for tabletops. I'd say 3 to 5 coats. And I use water-based just because it's easier to use both on the stain and on the polyurethane, but you can use whatever you want. So there you see that bigger top I was gluing together. That will not be featured in this video. So to make the legs, I want square pieces. So I use the width of the board to set my fence. And then I just go ahead and start ripping my pieces to make the legs. And these are just going to be 1.5 by 1.5 inches for the narrow tables. And I just keep cranking them out here. I already cut them to the length I wanted. And I I base the height of my end tables on other end tables that I see. It's usually about 25 or 26 inches tall. And you also want to look at how tall your sofa is or whatever it's going next to, and what feels comfortable to you. So you can customize that all you want. Now with my bigger tables, I didn't want to use just the 1.5 inch legs, so I glued up a couple of 2-inch legs. Now these are actually 2 inches by 3 inches, but I'll cut them down later to make them 2 inches square. Right now I'm just gluing up two 1.5 inch pieces by 2 inches. If that doesn't make any sense, don't worry about it, because I'm not going to feature the bigger tables in there. But you can make thicker legs for bigger tables, and that's what I'm doing. This is my what do you call these things? It's a jig that tapers the leg. It's a tapering jig. That's what it's called. And so I just I pin 2 scrap pieces to another scrap piece of plywood, and then I just push it through once, spin it, and push it through again. And that worked for the 1.5 inch legs as well as the 2 inch legs. And it is a very simple and easy thing to do to get those legs tapered. Now I am using pocket hole joinery on these tables. Now this means that these are not going to last for 50 years. These are not heirloom pieces. These might last 10 years, and by then I think we will be tired of the tables anyway, and they can just be like burn pile stuff. I did not invest a lot of money in this material, obviously. I think each one of these tables might cost $30 or $40 maximum in materials. So, like I said, I just use cheap joinery because it's easy and it's cheap material and everything good. So pocket holes it is. It's just one pocket hole on the 1-bys. Now I have to switch it from the 1.5 inch setting to the 3/4 inch setting, because I am going to incorporate some 3/4 inch plywood to make basically a drawer box on the top of these end tables. And so I have my 3/4 inch plywood here. My bit is set, and then I am going to attach this with 3/4 inch also. So I have a short piece and a long piece, because there's a short side and a long side to my end tables. And just getting the pocket holes in there and put some going in both directions, so it's a good strong joint. All right, so here is some of the putting togetherness, whatever you call it, the construction, the assembly. There's a good word. So I'm putting a little piece of plywood on there. This is the short end. Obviously, it's important actually to do the short end first, because you need access to those screws. And if you built the longer end first, it's really hard to get the rest of the pieces together. So do the short ends first. Do yourself a favor. But now it's time to use those long pieces to connect both of the short end pieces together. And then you basically have your carcass of the end table at that point. I'm just using glue and the pocket holes that I've already pre-drilled. It's hard to hold these in place sometimes. I try to clamp as best I can, but it's an awkward system. But here we go. We're starting to see some carcass going on now. And it's starting to look pretty good. We'll line them all up. One thing to worry about is these wanting to sit flat on the floor when you're done. You can use leveling feet if you want. That's an ideal thing. I just kind of winged it, and worked out for me. Every floor isn't level anyway, so you can get it perfectly level and still might wobble. So leveling feet really helps. So here I am adding the round over. Now that everything is put together, it is a good time to round over all of the edges so it looks seamless and looks like you put it together on purpose the way it is. And it's easy to miss a section. Anyway, I did paint it off camera. I hope you know how painting works. I used a sprayer, but this is a small enough piece, a roller would work just as well. I'm using a Forstner bit to countersink these figure-8 fasteners, and that is how the top will be fastened. Now I had a twist in my top board, which is really annoying. So one of these is countersunk and one of them actually is not, and that kind of counteracted the twist I had in my board. It really stinks, but that's what I had to go with. And there's ways to get twists out of a board, but it's not easy and it's not fun. It takes a lot of time. So here we are attaching the top to the base, and everything is upside down. Go ahead and use some 1.5-inch screws to do that. Make sure everything's lined up when you do that. I've already put some rails on it this time for the drawer that I'm going to slide in there, as well as for the bottom slats, which is just 1x4 material that I stained dark walnut also. And there you can see the drawer box, and I put this drawer together, which I did not film, but I can go over that if you want to. And I put a little 2x4 block for the drawer front. All right, so with the drawer, I put a 2x4 block on the front, and I just painted that and burned it to match a color scheme that we have in our living room. On the front, I had some scrap pieces of cherry, so I used that for the pull. Now this does not have any drawer slides except for the rails that I just attached with glue and pin nails that are in there. And I put some pieces right here to keep it from wobbling too much. Now the drawer itself is made out of some scrap 1/2-inch plywood that I had. And to assemble the drawer, you see there's a 1/2-inch reveal on the bottom here. So I had to send this 1/2-inch material through the plywood. I had to send this 1/2-inch material through the table saw, just a couple kerfs in order to get the drawer bottoms in there. So you see, you pass it through once, pass it through twice, and then you have enough space for your drawer bottom to slide in there. Now, the way I like to make a drawer box is I put 3 sides that are going to have that groove in there. That's the front and the 2 sides. Now the back is short because I like to actually slide the bottom. Let's see here. There we go. I like to actually be able to slide the bottom in and out if I want to. Now that came out a little bit, but it's pretty tight in there, which is a good thing. But I make this short just on top of the groove. That way I can assemble the box itself before I even install the bottom. But once this is glued and pin nailed together, the box, I can slide the bottom in just like that. Boom. Pretty tight though. But yeah, when you finish making the box, you can glue it or pin it right there, and then it wouldn't slide out on accident. But it's a pretty good box, and it's really good for holding all the stupid things that your kids leave lying around. There we go, super smooth. So yeah, if your kids leave a bunch of video game controllers all over the living room, now you got a place for those things to fit in there. And then you're ready to close them up, and you don't have to stare at them or kick them or step on them anymore. The other thing that was not in the video was installing this bottom, which is just slats of 1x4 material that I stained, like I mentioned earlier. And I put some rails on it, just like the rails that the drawers are sitting on. And then I just pinned them from the bottom so the pinholes don't show up on the top. And it's a pretty good look. Anyway, as always, I really appreciate you watching everything. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button if you like this kind of content. And as always, don't be afraid to be a doofus.